Now, viewers may be thinking this all rings a bell with the Met Police attitude prior to the 2024 St George's Day celebrations. The Met Police Press Department was on the ball with its messaging. We believe those planning to attend include far-right groups and groups linked to football clubs travelling from elsewhere in the UK. Observers were wondering where they had heard those same words before.
Come back with us to 2020, when violent Marxists were destroying London, and the mayor also made an attempt to conjure up Nazis, but, unusually, got rather more pushback than he was expecting.
And we now know the extreme far right will be having counter protests, and for those reasons, I'm asking people to please, please, please stay at home.
How do you categorise the extreme far right?
Well, we now know, not just the police, but anybody can do some basic research, that some of the extreme far right are using language of protecting statues.
What section of potential protesters do you refer to when you say extreme far right?
Well, the likes of Yaxley Lennon and Batten and their followers, and the so-called democratic football lads, and on and on.
The behaviour from the previous weekend was seen as a great affront to British values. And the following weekend, many patriots came to London to make their dismay known. Reporting those events, the BBC picked up the mayor's theme.
From mid-morning, hundreds of men, most of whom were already drinking, headed into Parliament Square. Some were members of football hooligan networks who had put aside their differences for the day. Others were from the far right. But despite claims that the day was about defending British heritage, it soon became violent.
Yes, you heard it on the BBC. Drunken far-right football hooligans. The live coverage of the day continued the theme.
This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. I'm Geeta, Guru-Murthy. Groups including right-wing activists have clashed with police in central London as they gather near Parliament Square and the controversial statue of Sir Winston Churchill. But as you can see, this is Parliament Square now. You can see British flags there and a number of different groups potentially. Some we know have been singing the national anthem, talking about saving the statue. You can see the statue there just boarded up of Winston Churchill. It had been the subject of graffiti marks, calling the Churchill statue racist, and that has provoked a certain degree of anger. But of course, it all centres, in that particular case, around Winston Churchill's record on empire, which has been very controversial down the years. Well, our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons has been with the protesting group, the bigger group, who include far right-wing groups in Whitehall. Is it possible to say whether this was coordinated? How many of the people out there are allied with right-wing or far-right groups?
What we know from the kind of intelligence around people who watch these groups very closely is that this was a coalition really of certainly far-right groups like Britain First. The leader of Britain's First was seen out in the crowd today. But there was a big significant proportion of people from the Football Lads Alliance. Now, the FLA is not a particularly political organisation, but I think it has been motivated by what it would regard as threats to pieces of British symbolism, the statues, and also the threat to history.
And you know, some people have been asking whether there were Nazi salutes. It's not clear whether there were, whether we can verify that or not. But if any of these far right, groups were out there at present, people have pointed out the irony of those sorts of people with those sorts of views defending Churchill.
I didn't see anybody give a Nazi salute. I've been out most of the day in the protests from quite early on, and you can be sure if somebody did, the very trigger-happy photographers who are around the place will get in there and take pictures of it.
So, probably no Nazis. Now, here's Geeta in 2024 still on her derangement trip.
Let's have a think about our friend Donald Tusk, who I did battle with in the European Parliament many times, very much an EU lovey. Now, of course, the Prime Minister of Poland. He has talked about the wave of, and I'm using his words, not mine, aggressive young males that are coming into Poland, having crossed the Mediterranean, and he has said that this is now a matter of national security.
Nigel Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference. He declined to stand for a seat, but we will have more on. Now, an apology. Earlier today, we heard live from Nigel Farage speaking at that election event we just saw. And when we came away from his live speech, I used language to describe it, which didn't meet the BBC's editorial standards on impartiality. I'd like to apologise to Mr Farage and viewers for this.